What's up, guys? Today we're going to talk about dividend ETFs. We've done several videos before talking about owning individual stocks for passive income, right? That's what it's all about, passive income, getting income to come to your account without you having to go out there and put in the time and the labor and the effort. So we've talked about if you want to go that way, there is some work required upfront, and that is owning individual stocks. And I'm not gonna lie, owning individual stocks is fun. It's fun to see your individual holding that you own 100 shares of Coca-Cola, or you own 25 shares of Home Depot. It's fun, right? You feel like I'm a small, tiny owner, and I get profits, I get dividends, capital appreciation, so on. But we say there's some upfront work, and the upfront work includes the research, where we have to know what are we buying into, right? So, for example, if you're going to invest into Coca-Cola, you're going to want to have to do your due diligence. So you're going to have to go to the investor relations page of their company. You're going to have to look at the numbers. You're going to look at the financial numbers, look at the revenue that's coming in from all that Coke and all the other products. You're going to have to look, is it a very high dividend payout ratio? Is it 100%? Like all the earnings is used to pay the dividends? Well, that's not really good because there's not enough money left over to grow the business. So we're going to have to do that type of digging. We're going to have to listen to the conference call, look through the annual reports and the quarterly reports. So there was a fair amount of work involved, and that is for one company. Right? So we said in your portfolio of dividend stocks, you may have 15 to 20 on the low end, because we want to be diversified, right? I know you saw the last video, but you want to be diversified. You want to have companies in different sectors: your consumer staples, your consumer discretionary, your information technology, financials, utilities, materials. All of these sectors want to be represented. So you're doing all that research on potentially 15 to 20 companies on the low end. On the high end, potentially 30, 40, 50, maybe 60 companies. That's a lot. That's a lot. So the alternative is a dividend ETF. Yes, there are dividend ETFs out there. There's an ETF in general. First question is, what is an ETF? An ETF, as you probably already know, stands for an exchange traded fund. An exchange traded fund. Why? Well, it is traded on an exchange such as the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. Those are exchanges. It is traded, and it's a fund, which means it's not an individual company. It's made up of a basket of companies. That's a fund. And you trade it just like a stock. So you can buy one share at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can sell it and then buy another share at 3 o'clock an hour later. So that's basically what it is, right? And the fund could hold, 50 companies. It could hold 100. It could hold 1,000. It just depends. You distinguish that from a mutual fund. When you have a mutual fund and you want to buy or sell it, it happens only once per day. If you put the order in for a mutual fund at 10 a.m., the order will not go through until I think it's 4 p.m. They do all their buying and selling in the mutual fund at one time, and that lowers the cost for them. But with an exchange traded fund, you can do it any time, so you have more flexibility. Even if the ETF and the mutual fund hold the same holdings, with the mutual fund, all of the transactions would happen once. I think it's at 4 p.m. But with the ETF, you can buy and sell like a regular stock, 10 a.m., 11 a.m., multiple times. So let's look at some of the pros and cons of having a dividend ETF versus holding individual stocks. Probably the main pros of owning a dividend ETF is going to be the instant diversification. That's one of the reasons people get it. the instant diversification. What I'm saying is that we talked about diversification before, right? You don't want to have all of your eggs in one basket. Imagine if you own McDonald's and you have 100% of your money in McDonald's. McDonald's cuts its dividend, right? All of your passive cash flow is done. So we diversify. But to do that with individual companies, right, you got to buy multiple companies. You got to watch them, right, do the research. With an ETF, you buy one share of the ETF and you get a little piece of ownership of all of the holdings that the ETF holds. For example, if the ETF holds 100 companies, you buy one share of the ETF, you own a little piece of all of those 100 companies. So you're immediately diversified, right? In the first example, if McDonald's goes down and that's 100% of your holding, you're in big trouble. With the ETF, if the ETF have 100 holdings and McDonald's is only one part of it, and McDonald's goes down, you see it has a less effect on the ETF because they have, in this example we gave, 99 other companies to balance the effect of McDonald's going down. So people love ETF for the immediate diversification. So that's one of the big pros. Now, one of the cons of the ETF is also related to the diversification. Let me explain. When you buy an ETF, it's like you're buying a basket of stocks, right? So in the basket, in the example we gave, could be 100 companies holding. There might be companies in there that you like. There may also be companies in the basket that you do not like. But because you're buying the ETF and the ETF holds it, you have no choice. If you're going to buy the ETF, you're going to get that company because it's part of the ETF. So that's one of the downside, right? As opposed to when you're buying your individual companies and you're building your own portfolio. Another pros of buying an ETF is it's just a whole lot less work. I'm just being transparent. You see all the work we have to do with the individual stock, and you multiply that by the number of holdings you have. With ETF, it's a whole lot of work. You buy one share. You don't have to go digging into earnings. You don't have to go researching the individual companies. Of course, you have to look and say, okay, yes, I like the holdings. I like most of the holdings that this ETF holds. But you don't have to go digging into the individual company that the ETF holds. If they hold 500 companies, you don't have to do that. So it's a lot less work, a lot less research. You do have to, however, research the ETF. So how long has it been in existence? What are the holdings? Do I like the companies in the holding, or most of them known to me, or most of them are not known? Is this mainly international companies? Is this mainly US companies? Is the dividend yield of the ETF something that I'm okay with? What about the dividend growth of the ETF? What about the capital appreciation? Yes, we are doing it for dividends, but we also want our capital to appreciate, right? We don't want to be getting dividends, but our capital that we invested in the company is going down, right? The share value is going down, right? If that happens, there must be a reason why. And eventually that's going to affect the dividends, right? They may have to cut it. So, of course, we love dividends. But we also like capital appreciation as well. One of the cons of the ETF are the fees, right? Because you're not having to do all this research. Somebody else is doing it. That's the fund manager. And they have to be compensated. The team has to be compensated. And you see that in the expense ratio. We talked about that in that video. The expense ratio is the fee you're paying to the fund manager to manage the ETF, and it's given in a fraction. So, for example, an expense ratio of 0.38 would mean For every $1,000, since 1,000 has three zeros, you would move the decimal place 3 places to the right. That'll tell you how much you pay. So in the example of 0.38, for every $1,000 you have invested, you would pay $3.80. You don't have to write a check or anything. That's taken out of your holdings somehow. And for every $10,000 you have invested, you would pay them $38. So when you pick your own individual stock, there's no fee. So that's one of the cons. But that's to be expected, because if they're saving you time by doing all of the rebalancing and all of the research, then yes, obviously you have to pay for it. So one of the big pros with the dividend ETF is just a hands-off approach. You do your upfront research on the ETF, you buy your shares, and then it's hands-off. You sit back and you just try to add to your position, get your dividends, reinvest it or spend it, whatever you want to do. So it's a real nice way to kind of invest and kind of have a hands-off approach and live your life. One of the cons, I would say, and people may disagree whether it's a con or not, is that when you own individual stocks, you feel like an owner. I'll say that, right? So when I'm driving around town and I see a Coca-Cola truck, or I'm driving by Starbucks, I'm driving by McDonald's, I'll say, oh yeah, I own shares in that company. And you kind of have like pride of ownership, right? Or you go to a gas station to fill up, you're like, yeah, I own stock in this gas company. With an ETF, you may not feel that. I'll say that. You may not feel that. The ETF may hold that company in the ETF, but you may not have the same feeling. Another con with with owning an ETF is that you're not in control. Right? It's very passive in terms of like the research for the individual holdings. You can't sell the holdings that's in the ETF. You could sell the ETF, but the individual holdings, it's a package deal. It's all or nothing. So you're not in control. As opposed to if you are buying individual stocks, you can decide, this is going down. I may use it as a buying opportunity to buy more shares, or I may sell. Like, you can sell the whole holding. But with the ETF, it's either you hold the whole thing or you don't. The decisions are made by the fund manager. Another con that may come up with the dividend ETF is the dividends may not automatically be qualified, right? Qualified dividends is basically the preferential tax treatments you get when you own regular companies like McDonald's or Home Depot. They're considered qualified dividends by the IRS, and they are taxed at the long-term capital gains rate, which is lower. It could be 0% for some individual, for some people. It could be 15%. It could be as high as 20% if you hold it within a certain time period. I believe it's 60 days. I believe you have to hold it for at least a 60-day period around the ex-dividend date. Maybe 60 days before and 60 days after the ex-dividend. You have to hold it for at least a 60-day period. And you get that preferential treatment. But with the dividend ETF, it might not automatically qualify for this qualified dividend treatment because of the holdings and whether it is and whether it has international holdings, because only U.S. companies are granted this qualified dividend treatment. So if the ETF you hold have foreign holdings, it may not. Real estate investment trust, REITs, are not given this preferential tax treatment. Their tax is ordinary dividends. So if the ETF holds real estate or REITs, it may not be granted this preferential tax treatment. So that's something you have to look into. But otherwise, it is very passive. It is hands off. You do your research up front. It gives you automatic diversification. It's a great way to go. Either 100% as a core position, core holding, and then you may have some individual stocks around it, what they call a core and satellite strategy. Again, guys, the MD Investor, increasing our financial IQ so we can teach our children and break the cycle of generational poverty. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, and I'll see you on the next one.